and God delivers them by using a judge. And it goes on. There's a cycle of these things. So when you read this, and you're reading things, these stories, and you read about the battles and the cycles and the disobedience, and even the men who are supposed to be the men of God all have situations in their lives, whether you're talking about Gideon or Samson. But you have this story that's like right in the midst of this time period, and you read it, and it's like it's almost like a story about domestic life. And for some reason, this family decides, this mom, this dad, and these two sons decide that they're going to leave this area of Bethlehem and go to Moab, which for the most part is an enemy nation, but they're going to go to Moab because there's a famine in the land. Now, when you look at a Bible map of the time period, the distance from Bethlehem to Moab, maybe a 2 or 3 day journey on foot through some rugged terrain. 2 or 3 day journey maybe. But they're leaving Israel and they're going to Mount Moab because there's a lack of food. Now, you read certain commentators and some will say, well, there are places in Moab or times that seem like they got more rain than Bethlehem, and maybe that was the reason why. But there's not really a great distance between the two places, so that's kind of questionable. But there are times in the history of Israel, especially in the time of Judges, that around the harvest time, these enemies would come, the Midianites and the Amalekites would come, and they would just ravage the land, and the Israelites would go running up into the mountain, and they would stay there until their land was completely ravaged. When these people come, they would bring their livestock, and they would just, anything that was grown would be gone, and the land would be ravaged. So probably it was a situation like this, whereby this family decides that they're going to leave and they're going to go to Moab. Husband, wife, 2 sons. While they're there, the 2 sons get married. Then all of a sudden, things start to happen. The husband dies. And then you have a situation where the children die. Now you have 3 widows living together in a difficult situation. And they stay there. Naomi stays there for about 10 years. Then she hears the report that there is food in Israel, and she decides that she is going to leave Moab and go back to the area of Bethlehem. At least she knows some people there. So there's a custom, I suppose, in this time period when somebody like this would decide to leave, maybe your friends would go with you up to the border. So these 3 ladies, the mother, the 2 daughters-in-law, they travel, they get to the border of Moab, and Naomi decides she's going to try to talk these ladies who have no husbands anymore, talk them out of going with her. I'd like to be able to tell you, ladies, that I'm going to go back and get married again, and I'm going to have more children, and when these children grow, that you can have these children, these boys, as your husbands, but that's just not going to work out because I'm kind of old. So why don't you just go back to your country and, with your people, serve your gods, and maybe things will work out for you. Well, one left. But one decided that she was going to stay. Ruth decided, you know what? I'm going to go with you. Where you die, I'm going to die. Your people are going to be my people. And she said this, and your God is going to be my God. She didn't say your gods. She said your God. She's coming from a place that served gods, small g, but now she's going to a place that had one God, and your God is going to be my God. And I thought to myself, one of the failures of Israel, as far as God was concerned, was they were supposed to be a light to the nations around them. Surely that wasn't happening in the time of the Judges. If anything, it was reversed. But here's a situation where this woman goes to a foreign country, and even in the difficult times, now this woman thinks that God has just abandoned her. There's no question. There's a couple of remarks that she makes in the scriptures, in the story, that just, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara. It's a bitter time. It's an empty time. I came here to Moab full. I'm going home empty. But even in the difficulties, she's able to live a life that's attractive. Something about her life is attractive to Ruth. So much so that she doesn't want to stay there. She wants to go. And it's kind of a sad story for a little while until they get back in the land. And I'm thinking to myself, God, you're so cool. You are so cool, because when you read the story and you end it, you just see how God is working behind the scenes. I mean, she was 10 years in a foreign country. She went with her husband. She came back with nothing. No husband, no children, nothing. And she had to go and find a place to live. We don't even really know who she was staying with. They get there. It's during a barley harvest. It's time of year when the barley would be harvested, and Naomi says to Ruth, Ruth, I want you to go out into the field. And there's traditions in Israel at this time that if you owned a field and you harvested in the field, that you wouldn't take all the grain. You would leave some. I was in Cambridge the other day, and we were watching a homeless man on the road, and the cars would stop at the red light, and he would go up and down, and people would give him money. And it's allowed there. They allow that there. Some places they don't allow that. They allow that there. Well, in Israel, they allowed people who really didn't have much to travel alongside the people harvesting and pick up what they left behind. It was okay to do that. So Naomi says to Ruth, Ruth, I want you to go, and I want you to go out to a field where they're harvesting and just kind of pick up after the harvest is, and maybe that will give us enough so we can, get by. And she says, whatever you do. And when you look at Ruth, Ruth is this special lady. She's just this special lady who finds some kind of joy or fulfillment in serving her mother-in-law in this difficult time. I mean, you read this book in the time of the judges, and these are quality people. These are quality people who care about God. So Ruth does what her mother-in-law says. She goes out to the field, and she's picking up after the harvesters. And she happens to get to a field that's owned by a man named Boaz. Older man. Maybe he was a little different. Doesn't seem like he had a wife, at least at that time. He was a man of great wealth, the Bible says. He owned fields. A lot of people worked for him. And he said to his servants, who's this lady who's gleaning in my field? And they said, this is Ruth, who came to Bethlehem with Naomi. And Boaz says, this is the lady I've heard about. And it's just the way he talks about her, that she is just like this wonderful person who is serving Naomi, who's an older lady. And when you read down through here, let me just read this verse to you. Boaz replied to her, this is verse 11, chapter 2, all that you have done for your mother-in-law after the death of your husband has been fully reported to me, and how you left your father and your mother and the land of your birth and came to a people that you did not previously know. May the Lord reward, no, this is almost like a prophetic thing that pops off the page. It says, may the Lord reward your work. your wages be full from the Lord. May the Lord reward your work and your wages be full from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to seek refuge. She's from Moab. She has a heart for God. God's taking care of her. When you read this story, you see God working behind the scenes. Naomi has had a difficult life. She's lost a lot of things. She feels like she's empty, but God's working behind the scenes. Folks, when you go through these kinds of times in your life, she thought that God had abandoned her. God has taken his hand from me. I'm no longer in the favor of God. I was full. Now I'm empty. 10 years. But God's working behind the scenes. Folks, God is working behind the scenes. He's got a plan and purpose for each one. And as I go through the Old Testament, the thing that stands out to me is the plan and the purpose of God and how he accomplishes it every step of the way, no matter who he's dealing with in the human realm.